My name is Derek Bishop, the co-founder of Culture Consultancy, and we specialize in designing and embedding cultures to support strategy execution, whether that be to support change or rapid growth or digital transformation, M&A activity, or creating performance cultures. Now, the purpose of this webinar is to share some thoughts on the key leadership behaviors that we all need to be adopting in leading through these unprecedented times. Because even if people are normally good leaders, stressful conditions like we're going through at the moment often means that people behave differently. And that's one of the reasons why we thought actually this webinar will be a good opportunity for us to share our thoughts on what we actually feel is really critical at this point in time. And one of the other dynamics we're going to look at is specifically how to lead remote teams. Now, what we're not going to be doing is looking at specifically at how people work at home, their own personal setup and working from the bedroom, etc., but more about the things you need to consider in leading in a remote team, particularly if this is something you haven't done before or you haven't done on this scale. So that's what we're going to be covering this morning. Now, I appreciate in an hour we can't cover all of these two topics but we're in as much detail as we may like. We'll go as wide and deep as we possibly can in the time available. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and so that we can just focus on what we're gonna be covering this morning, or the agenda for the session. So the plan for the session is that I'll share some initial thoughts on and perspectives on some of the key leadership behaviours, and particularly around then leveraging the capabilities of our people. And I'm going to just spend about 15 minutes on that, because then what I want to do is use the power of this group to have a wider discussion on what our own perspectives are and other thoughts, questions and challenges that we're seeing or hearing, or the perspectives we have. I'll then move on to the second topic of leading a remote workforce, talking around the communication, individual and team engagement, how about optimizing performance, management controls, and the culture strain that we might see happening. And then what we do again there is focus on having a discussion session to again share people's different thoughts and perspectives. So let's kick off with the first topic of leading and managing through these unprecedented times. I guess first of all, there's got to be a little bit of context. As business leaders, we're all in a very dynamic and unprecedented situation, which means we don't have previous direct experience from which we can easily determine the right answer. The situation requires us to tap into some key, authentic and exemplary leadership capabilities, using knowledge, data and past experiences to help inform what we each do, but recognizing there are no direct comparable situations that we've been in that we can just say the right answer is A, B, or C. And what's clear is that the situation is changing with such a pace that the speed at which we need to make these decisions and take action is unbelievably fast. So the leadership we provide to our people is not surprisingly under heavy scrutiny. Our people are looking to us for support, guidance, and direction, and they are listening, questioning, and processing everything against their own personal views and the situation that is playing out with them every day. That scrutiny will continue all the way through the current crisis and for a long time afterwards. So let's now look at some of what I think are some of the key leadership attributes that will make a fundamental difference to the way you lead your people, your businesses, your customers, and your suppliers and partners through this global challenge. Now, the first one I wanted to touch on is around the need to model the way and set a personal example of what we expect from others. How we want people to communicate, to behave, to support each other, both at a personal level and for the organization. Now, the empathy, care and support we show our people sets the examples of others. So we really need to be very clear about what do we want to see in others and ensuring that we're modeling that. It's also about following through on commitments and doing what you say you're going to do. But if things change and that means previous commitments are no longer valid or relevant, then call it out and be open about it. You'll gain more respect by openly talking about the changing circumstances and what that means than just ignoring it and moving on. We should also probably be demonstrating that we are with the people all the way through this. So it's about leadership from within our teams. You know, great military leaders earn the troops' trust by fighting alongside them or suffering along with them. And I think a war against the virus and its implications on business, employees and our colleagues want to know that our leaders are sharing the sacrifice and challenge. But being very realistic, we're unlikely to do everything perfectly, particularly when your people have such diversity of views about the situation, and the impacts on them and their family situations may vary significantly too. So asking for feedback from your people on how you are doing, what's working for them and what's not working for them is really important. And consider that feedback and act on it accordingly. Now, unfortunately, this is one of those behaviours that leaders generally don't do enough of in a normal situation or a thriving situation. But it's really important for us to understand how our leadership is effectively working or not working. And when we look back at leaders who have stood out, whether they be political leaders, business leaders, third sector leaders, or leaders in sport, some of the other characteristics of these admired leaders also includes honesty and being inspiring. So again, I believe these are quite fundamental characteristics that we need to be demonstrating in the current climate. Now, the reality of the pandemic is terrible and terrifying, but it will pass as well. The economy will recover and great businesses will be built or rebuilt. Now, the key task for many business leaders right now is to ensure that the organisation is still around to benefit from the opportunity for growth which will follow. The current period of value destruction and market starvation will be followed by a period of market expansion and consumer demand. And in today's unprecedented climate, many leaders will make immediate decisions under the most extreme short-term pressure, but unfortunately, this can lead to poor choices. Which brings me on to what I believe is another characteristic of admired leaders, and something that I feel is quite pertinent at this point in time, is about being forward-looking. Many leaders are likely to be in the long grass or in the weeds at the moment, but we need to inspire people with a shared set of goals and ultimately a vision of the future, the other side of this pandemic. In the short term, these goals may just be for the next week, for the next month, or the next quarter. Then as we move through this challenge, looking to the other side of the global crisis, we will need to provide a new vision for the future to inspire and engage our people. But what's critical, I believe, here and now for leading through this level of uncertainty is agreeing what the immediate primary goals are. For example, an organization's primary goals might be, firstly, to do everything possible to look after our people, supporting them and keeping them physically and mentally well. A second goal may be around maintaining continuity of service for our existing customers and appropriately supporting them through the challenges. And the third one might be about protecting and minimizing the impact on the business. So those are three examples. They may vary. For Dyson, for example, one of their primary goals may have been about designing a ventilator and production capability that will enable them to produce mass volumes of new ventilators within X number of weeks. And they're now on the cusp of moving rapidly to producing 10,000 ventilators. So our people are looking to us for the direction and agreeing the guidance on priorities for the teams and departments. So even if you're not setting the goals for the business overall and the priorities, ensure that the team and departmental goals and priorities are clear. Once those goals are clearly understood, it will help break down any pre-existing barriers for getting things done. I've seen in the last 2-3 weeks some remarkable situations where internal politics have been pushed aside quite fundamentally because there's been that clarity of these are the primary goals. So even if you're not setting company direction goals prior to, make sure you're setting goals for your team or department, which are aligned with those overall business priorities. But providing this direction, the next one I'd say also leads on to needing to have the courage, curiosity, and challenge around the way we do things. Running a successful business is simple, but it's not as easy at times of challenge. And that's when this strong and clear leadership is key. And as leaders, we need to stay calm, remain confident, make clear, considered decisions for the short term, but also at the earliest opportunity possible, use this period to reassess the business and how you do things for the long term. Leaders can be guilty of not challenging the norm or of being satisfied with following procedure and tradition. So it takes courage to question why we do things the way we are. So when was the last time that you critically analysed the fundamentals of the business with everything on the table for inclusion? That's a very rare situation that actually happens. Now, the world may never be the same again, so this period is a key time to revisit what your business will be in the future and how it will operate. And one such example is remote working. Many businesses have been forced to do it, and whilst some thought it was inconceivable that they'd do it, for some, that's actually been an absolute requirement and they've had no option. So when we start to emerge from the other side of this pandemic, leaders will question why they need the amount of office space they have. In fact, I was on a call earlier this week with 2 leaders from separate businesses who both made that same point. But it's not just about us being curious and challenging the way we do things. We need to be enabling a culture of agility, continuous learning, and innovation so that we're tapping into our greatest asset, our people. So those were my initial thoughts on the top 3 leadership practices about modeling the way, being forward-looking, that direction, goals and priorities and setting a vision, but also about the courage, curiosity and challenge. Now, the final topic I just wanted to talk about was around harnessing the talent in others. And again, just a little bit of context and framing from what I'm going to quickly discuss now is that during the 2008 financial crisis, decision-making in many organizations was taken further up the chain of command, with senior leaders making very detailed operational management decisions in order to control costs and manage risks. We've removed empowerment. For many organizations, once they started recovering from this recession, they've had to relearn, adopt, and empower their people again, which for some has taken many years. In this current crisis, we're at risk of repeating this same mistake. And as leaders, we clearly need to be managing the risks and impacts of the crisis, but that doesn't mean we need to go back to decisions only being taken by senior leaders. We need to radically change the way we do things, and the drive, diverse thinking and creativity of our people will be a key contributor to how we come out the other side of this pandemic. However, we can't assume that everyone will think, decide and act in the same way as we do as leaders. So the more we help our people to also view the world through the lens of us as leaders, to complement their own view, the insights they have of the marketplace, their customers, their knowledge of suppliers and partners, and also of the technology that's out there, the stronger capability we'll have for the journey we are all on. So we need to tap into the capability we have in our people. So some of the thinking that I had around how we do this is, first of all, I think we need to help our people understand what's going on in our minds as leaders. What things are we considering? What are the factors that are influencing our decision making? And what decisions would we make? And most importantly, why? Or what might the constraints be? So I've put all this in the bucket of educate. It's about providing that understanding and rationale and thinking and helping our people understand what's going on in our minds. The second point then is around involving them in discussing the situations and possible scenarios. It's really important that we really harness their diversity of views, experiences, thinking and ideas, and that as this will help our own decision making and the solutions we find. So I've put that under the bucket of engage. The third section I've said is around providing a clear guidance to people on decisions and actions people can take action on, recognizing that this guidance may change very rapidly, but be clear on what things should be escalated. So really empower your people to push ahead, take actions and make decisions, but provide the clear boundaries and the clarity on when they do need to seek further input and guidance. But provide that guidance rather than default to a refer to the leader type approach, which is all about the empower side of things. And the fourth section then is about ensuring you're providing the timely formal updates on policies, decision-making parameters, authority levels, and escalation requirements. Because with so much information being received by people, we can't assume that everyone will keep exactly in sync with the changes unless we provide the clarity, the collateral, and the updates to the structures, the policies to confirm the position. So I've put that under the category of enable. Now, with the circumstances changing so quickly, it's important that we continually check in that we are educating, engaging, empowering, and enabling our people to do the right thing and avoid disempowering them. Achieving optimum business performance through this uncertain epidemic period will only be achieved if we continue to engage and empower our people, recognizing, of course, that we need to provide them with strong, exemplary leadership. And then, now, involving your people in exploring the challenges and, most importantly, finding the right solutions, your people will want to express their views. So actively listen to their diverse points of view and don't feel that you have to have all the answers. Your people will help you find the right answers and the right solutions. And given the context of, the human beings are probably the most complex component in any business, it's important that we really harness this complexity and the diversity of views, experiencing, thinking and ideas. That's how we're going to make sure we do the right thing. And I guess just quickly, it goes without saying that we should be appropriately and extensively praising and recognising the efforts of our people, sharing the stories of encouragement about the good work of others, and letting people know about the confidence you have in their abilities. So those were my initial sort of thoughts on the two topics, and really what I wanted to do now was open up to discussion in the rest of the group to get some other perspectives, because equally I don't believe I have all the answers and all the right ideas. So I wanted to use the power of this group to also allow people to share some thoughts and some questions as well. So we're an entire business-wide shift. So there was five buckets that I've seen coming through, and we've touched on a couple of these already about ensuring the effective communication, because written communication, doing things via email or via some of the social channels it takes longer and it's not as effective as an actual conversation. And short messaging, actually with some of the so many social tools like Slack and Yammer, can be slightly problematic as well, because it tends to be very short and sharp messaging. And one of the other things is that by having all these tools available to us, video calls, Slack, etc., is that you can end up in an always on mentality. So people can be overloaded with their communication, which can also become distracting. And it was interesting just listening to the eyes are being more productive. So all of this, and it all requires different disciplines. So some of my thoughts are around you've got to have guidance on how to effectively communicate, what channels to use for which purposes, because otherwise it can be completely overwhelming for people. And almost create that schedule of daily or weekly meetings with a clear purpose and set of timings. And I think the other thing around Also just having some communication off time, or as one client has now labelled it, golden time, when people can just properly focus without the risk of being distracted. Now, obviously there might be exceptions to that, but having some sort of golden time where it's like there's 2 hours where things just go quiet, unless it's by exception, actually can help with the focus and productivity. Those were some thoughts. On the individual and team engagement, we are going to have this range of different scenarios where you've got both parents working from home with school, kids homeschooling. Maybe they've got family members or friends who they know have got the virus and are isolating. Perhaps they're supporting elderly or vulnerable. So I think the key thing for us as leaders is about understanding each one of our team's individual circumstances, needs and wants and preferences. So really about listening and understanding their situation, and as we just talked about, is doing that on an ongoing basis. And agreeing a new regime of regular check-ins or one-to-ones, but obviously with a strong emphasis on the human aspect of their situation. So yes, talk about performance and priorities, but we do need to be talking about spending more time on the human side of things. Buddy the team members up. So, have people looking out for one another so that it doesn't all come to self. But I think the need for ongoing conversation on one-to-one and as a team collective is really important. The third area, which is around optimizing the performance. We are going to need our people to perform and perform to their very best in the circumstances that your business is in, our customers are in, and also our own personal circumstances. Because this isn't just going to be a 2-3 week exercise. We need to deliver what's needed, albeit the priorities might keep changing. So I think the thing around clarifying the roles across the team, particularly if people now have some additional responsibilities or maybe become the go-to person for certain matters, which maybe wasn't the case when you're all in the office together. Then also the second part of this is really about involving the people in sharing ideas on how to improve their ways of working now, given we've made a fundamental shift, what ways of working can be improved to make people's life easier so they can do what they need to do in the time they have available. And as I think, Susan, you mentioned around also looking at how can they optimize a performance, bearing in mind their personal circumstances. So do they want to split their time across longer days and do, around the kids' school and stuff, and so they do some different shifts of time, but at least agreeing that what works for them helps. And I think the other reality is, as leaders, we do need to have in our minds around how would we carry on if we only had 75% of the team, 50% of the team, 30% of the team, and how if we lose people due to the absence, how do we need to gear up for that, anticipate that, and maybe training people or buddying people up and some virtual shadowing just to help mitigate those possible scenarios that may unfold. The next one was just about management controls, and I think this was prompted by people have made the shift so rapidly, and it's been a very much a get the job done, get people working remotely really quickly, and that's naturally meant breaking some existing rules and protocols. So we would have increased the risk within the business, and as we now need to start to bed down the new normal ways of working, as leaders, we probably need to make sure that we've got the clear process controls and authorities in place. We've got good reporting and status updates, and we've got some new cross-functional disciplines and teamwork going on. And even down to things like cyber risk. Cyber risk would have shifted, has gone up massively as a result of the wide-scale change to remote working. So yes, we can do things from a technology point to manage that risk, but ultimately so much of the cyber risk is human related. So we do need our people to have a really clear perspective on what they need to be doing to protect the business. and upholding those tight personal security practices. And then the final one I wanted to talk about was about the culture strain. With this rapid transition to new ways of working, it's possible that the culture within the business will drift from what you had in the team or department or business previously. And if you allow this drift to continue without proactively leading it and guiding it to where you need it to be, there's a high likelihood you'll end up with a culture which is not fit for purpose, and you're likely to have multiple unintentional cultures rather than a positively aligned one. So I think as leaders, we need to, as we go through revisiting the ways of working, we need to go back to basics of using our company values to guide the redesign of those work practices, those policies, those processes, and recognize that we may actually need some different attributes in our culture, or maybe we need to turn the dial up on certain attributes, like, you know, the inclusivity and the collaboration may need to be more thought through and given more due consideration. We need people to be proactively asking questions, being curious and sharing ideas. We may need to adopt greater level of autonomy, or we may just need completely new levels of agility within the business, which, you know, many businesses have demonstrated over the last 2 to 3 weeks in the UK, but we'll need to continue that. So what's important from a cultural point of view is that we're making conscious decisions about the culture you need to serve the business well, and not just allow the culture to drift, which you'll see as being a bit of a risk, really. So those were my top 5 points based on my observations and reflections over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Thanks again for joining. Please feel free to continue the culture conversation by reaching out to me on any of the contact details that are shown next. Thank you again.